All right, so let's call this meeting to order, and we are certifying that we are in compliance with open meeting laws. Does anyone, before we start communications, want to make introductions?
I'll start, I guess.
Okay.
Greg Jensen, Alder.
And then you're here representing Public Works?
Representing Public Works, or Public Safety, excuse me.
Oh, okay.
John Halverson, Street Supervisor.
Brad Aberg, Director of Public Works.
Alex Loney, Office Manager at the Police Department, and Minute Writer.
Brandon Hill, Acting Chief of Police.
Tim Swadley, Mayor.
Christina Scanlon, I am the Chair for Public Works, and I also, or Public Safety, and I also sit on Public Works.
And then who's
Online?
Bob, Public Safety, Citizen Member.
Kay Rashka on North Page Street, Citizen Volunteer Public Works.
Andy Jessner, Public Safety, Citizen Member.
Sarah Abel, I'm a member of both Public Works and Public Safety, Chair of the Public Works Committee. So.
Oh, can't hear you, Jen.
Got it. Jen Wagner, Office Manager for Public Works Department and Minute Taker.
Oh, we have 2 minute takers.
Awesome.
You guys can compare notes.
We're a team.
All right, does anyone have any communications they'd like to share?
I have a few, if I may. So we're working on plans for road construction. We have bid openings set for beyond the Beyond Park area. So we have 5 different streets we're doing in that area to the east of Page Street. That bid opening is going to be March 10th. And then Van Buren Street from Creedeman to Gregg Trail. That one's also going out for bid shortly here. It'll be March 17th. We'll do a bid opening on that one. Working on Racetrack Road, getting that one put together with the town of Dunkirk. We have a meeting scheduled, another meeting with them scheduled for next Thursday to iron out some details for stormwater and access issues. So we'll get that put together. And then Main Page Court, we're working through that one. That's the smallest one, but the most difficult one. I'm not sure if you know where Main Page Court is, but it's a tight area. That's also the Jefferson Street pedestrian bridge goes to. So that's all part of that project. So we're working through some potential property acquisition there and hopefully get down off the ground soon.
Page will pave the whole thing over.
Yeah, well, wish it was that easy, but.
Just
yeah.
blame the DOT.
Yeah. Speaking of that, the DOT, a good segue. The DOT project, so they had a bid opening from Harrison, basically out to BAB. Integrity Construction is the lowest apparent bidder. They have not awarded it yet, but they're the lowest apparent bidder on that project.
I haven't heard of that one, you?
I've never worked with them. We're excited to meet them and work with them.
Don't sound like it.
So, yeah, give them the benefit of the doubt. So they, hopefully they get that, lab and get that started. As you guys may or may not know, there's gonna be a short shutdown of all traffic on 51 for the wall. That's gonna happen. Don't know the dates yet, but when the weather breaks for good, they're gonna continue working on the wall, get that shored up, finish the concrete on the north side of the roadway, and then hopefully get that opened up in probably 2.5 months.
Sidewalk, and then whatever they're gonna face that wall with.
Yeah, they'll do the wall. So basically there's the I-beams that are set. They'll pour the concrete wall basically around that, and the face of the wall will have a stain on it that look kind of like a stone face.
So the wood framing
That's temporary. That's just to shore it up. Okay. Yeah, that's just temporary.
Okay.
Yep. And then they'll put a stain on the face of that. So hoping that gets finished quickly and open up that section. And then from Harrison to Rowe Street, That'll be closed for roughly 3 weeks, entire closure, to underground sanitary. Originally, that was not supposed to be closed, it's supposed to be constructed under traffic. That's no longer the case, that the constructability of that with the underground, and it was not gonna work. So I'll have to shut that down. We'll do a local detour during that time frame. All the rest of the project will be done under traffic, and so we'll communicate that out to the public once we know more dates and detours and all that type of stuff. So just letting you know that's coming down the
And
pipeline.
that'll be changed from 4-lane down to two lane
Yep.
to the center lane.
Yep, the twiddle is what they call it, so it's basically a turn lane in the middle. So that'll be basically from Page Street out to near the subway area.
All to where?
Subway, that
Oh,
kind
subway.
of, that area
Hamilton Street.
will start to transition.
That'd be good.
Yeah. Yep, so that's coming down the pipeline. Spring will be here before we know it, so we got a little taste this last week, but
Helps slow things down out there.
yeah.
Well, that would be my communication, which you kind of segued into nicely. With this spring weather, we noticed pedestrians and dog walkers and bikes and everything have been out like crazy, so officers took it upon themselves to go out and do a speed waves today, try and slow down traffic, West Main and the Hamilton Street area. In less than an hour, they had 15 stops, and their criteria was 37, 38 minimum. If you think about stopping somebody, I did not get the fastest, though shimmy her to 41. And then we had to stop it because we ended up arresting a person for 7th offense, so to be that enforcement action. So some good enforcement going on today, and hopefully, I saw it already get the neighborhood pages, the cops are out stopping speeders, so maybe some medication with it and slow some people down before the kids really get out in a month or so.
We're working there today and watching at least 3 times somebody out.
Well, they had that fatality in Madison.
Yep, obviously speed related there too, so that's trying to slow people down sooner, but that area is rough. Hopefully the road changes will help some
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Actually, I believe that twiddle goes to Kings Lynn, I think that's one. Yep.
All right, I think we have to have a motion to approve these minutes, so.
I think we'll make a motion to approve the public safety minutes.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, moving on to public comment. Do we have anyone signed up tonight?
We did a public works minutes.
Go to Public Works.
Oh, public works minutes, sorry. I thought we did them together.
No.
Okay. Motion to approve the public works minutes.
I move to approve.
Second?
I'll second. I don't know if I can, but I
You
will.
can.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, moving on to public comments. Have anyone signed up? Anyone online? All right, we can move into old business, item number 6. Ordinance to amend parking prohibited at all times on 4th Street, and I will hand it over to you, Brett.
Yeah, Chief and I can kind of go through this. So I just want to give a little overview of why we went to, from 45 feet basically to a 33-foot roadway. On the memo that's in the packet, it kind of discusses the reasons why, and basically there's only so much right-of-way. It's a 66-foot right-of-way. We added an 8-foot bike lane on the north side of the west side of the roadway, which obviously is good to get pedestrians off the road onto the multi-use path. And then also the topography in that area. There's a picture in the packet that shows what it looked like before we did construction. There was a steep slope basically on the north side, the west side of the road. And we softened that slope and moved basically with the path and softening the slope, we moved that gutter line to the east about 12 feet. So that shrunk the roadway down to what you see now is 33 feet from curb to curb, curb face to curb face.
Yeah, I think the question at the last Public Safety Committee meeting is, you know, on the parking part of it, why did we reduce parking, and what was the process for making that decision?
So we didn't reduce any parking space. There's still space that you can technically park there. But if there's cars parked, I think there's another photo, some of those in the back. Yeah, so if you were to park a car across, it can become tight, but you can still fit through. However, on the curb section, it can become awfully tight, especially in the winter months if we do get a couple of different storms, you know, and we have you know, snow pack on the side of the roadway, it can shrink the roadway even further. But just keep in mind, there's only so much right of way to work with, so you know, as we add amenities like multi-use paths that are 8 to 10 feet, that takes up real estate. Obviously, the slope and the terrace, we had to soften that and move that curb out to make it a less of a slope.
Did the recent ordinance change to expand the, I call it the boulevard terrace? Was that implemented in this as well?
No, except for new development.
Okay.
So anytime we can increase the terrace width, we want to try to do that. Also, you know, weighing in the use of the roadway. That was really, we made the terrace wider because of the slope.
Okay.
It's hardly, some of these folks put actually wildflowers in this area because it was unmaintainable. You can't put a mower on most of these slopes. And so to soften that slope, we had to move the curb and gutter to the east. Into the roadway.
Okay.
We can only go so far to the east.
You could widen the terrace if you wanted to, but you don't have to, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And we tried to do, so on Van Buren, for example, this year and last year, we did put the road on a road diet, as we call it. So we, you know, shrunk the roadway itself, creating larger terraces. And so if we can do that type of thing where it's warranted, we will. Obviously, there's less cost in materials for asphalt, also less maintenance over time, it's less surface area to maintain. So that's why we try to do that when warranted. If we had the space, we'd probably keep this at more like 36 or so, but 33 is where it landed with the issue with the terrace and the 8-foot. Keep in mind, most residential streets also don't have an 8-foot bike path or 10-foot multi-use path on it. So, yeah, so you can see, even with snow, you can fit 2 cars through there. However, it would be tight. So,
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing, especially when I look at the sustainability plan, we're trying to figure out a balance between on-street parking and accommodations for pedestrian and you know, bicycling, basically. And I'm not sure where that is, but I think those are gonna be discussions that we have.
yeah, I mean, anytime we can create an opportunity to get walkers and bicyclists off the roadway, and they have every right to be on the road, bicyclists, for sure. But anytime we can provide the opportunity to go off the roadway, it's better for safety.
Right, and you'll have people in their neighborhoods that are used to parking on the road that don't want that to come at their expense.
Right. As we put bike lanes on the roadway, sometimes that does impact parking, or it shifts the bike lane in towards the lane of travel, which is also a potential risk.
So I don't know, I think maybe that's something that going forward, you guys can maybe work on a philosophy, and I know, you know, Rip has been in those conversations as well, and Shimmy, of course, and then maybe work with the sustainability folks, because they have a huge thing in there, the Green Street thing, and I just don't know how we're gonna be able to execute, or where it makes sense to execute and where it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, there's only so much right of way to work with, and, you know, just trying to balance the correct use of the roadway or the right of way. There's a lot of competing interests within a right of way, so like doing our due diligence to make sure we're set up right. You know, working with the topography, like in this situation, if we didn't have a slope like we do on the terrace area, we could probably have kept the roadway a little bit wider. But with the slope the way it was, and making the conscious choice to make it more maintainable with a larger terrace, that also impacts snow storage and leaf storage for our collections.
Yeah, it also adds to the character of the neighborhood too, so,
Sure.
there's positives there too.
Sure, yep. Yep.
Another monkey wrench that we're gonna have to throw into the equation is the electric scooters and bikes and such, which we're gonna be talking about,
Yeah.
I'm assuming pretty soon here, right, Christine? Yeah, so I mean, that's something else. We have no clue where we're gonna go with that yet.
Yeah, I think we're gonna find there's some stuff that would have to happen at the state level in order to give us the local control we need to do any enforcement.
Yeah, that's the thing is, do you allow them to go on bike paths and things like that? You know, are they motorized, or are they not motorized, you know?
Well, you got bikes, motorized bikes, okay, they have pedals. And then you also have the motorized scooters,
Yeah,
which are basically bicycles without
Yeah.
pedals.
they're fast.
Yeah, and they're fast.
Yep.
And then you got the stand-up racer type. And there's just so many different variations that.
It's becoming prevalent.
We do, and
Yeah.
we don't wanna be able to, I'm getting ahead of it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got an update there to share too.
Okay.
when we get there.
At the last public safety meeting, you guys had asked for traffic numbers. We fortunately have a speed board right mid-block of this. And in January, 10,768 cars went southbound on 4th Street between Milwaukee and Chicago. Assuming as many went northbound as southbound, we're at 21 to 22,000 cars a month.
Wow.
I also did a very scientific study since I live a quarter mile south of there and drive it every single day into town. The most I ever saw for cars parked in this area was 4. On average, it's 2 or 3. Unfortunately, there's almost always 2 there, and they're on the side that this ordinance would prevent them from parking on because they park in front of that, I think it's a Sixplex, the apartment building there,
Yeah.
just south of Mant Park. So this isn't gonna impact a ton of cars, at least right now.
So keep in mind, you know, Chief said 20,000 cars per month, that's not a lot. So keep in mind that Main Street gets about 13 to 15,000 cars per day.
Yeah.
So per day, you're talking about 667 cars per day on that stretch. So it seems like a lot, you know, per month, but
Yeah.
per day.
Well, for not being a main road, it seems like it's a lot.
Yeah, it's not though. You know, over the course of 24 hours, it's more average, I would say.
You know, and then when you have a special event at Van Park, obviously that changes everything.
Yeah.
But I think you guys do a pretty good job of managing that.
Yeah, there's a lot more traffic coming down Milwaukee or 4th Street from Main Street to Man Park and then going back that way.
Mhm.
Of course, you'll get some to the south, but the majority of the cars are going to the north to Main Street or to
The
the.
reconfiguration of the park road has had an impact on that, a good impact. I'm sure.
Yeah, it funnels cars, you know, basically, you know, towards Riverside and then out to the, you know, they take a right at Riverside and go right to Main Street.
So I have a question or a thought. Have we ever, in these situations like this, prior to making these changes, have we ever thought about, you know, sort of lack of a better way to put it, like doing a test run? So like, you know, postponing this until maybe next winter and prohibiting parking on that side of the street for, say, the month of December and
I mean,
testing it, seeing how it works out
I mean,
for everyone.
You can always create the ordinance and then repeal it at a later date.
Well, I think the chief has special powers if he wants to post it as temporarily no parking.
That was my thought, if this doesn't pass, one of the bigger fears, at least in my mind, will be when the fair comes, because that's when both sides are just gonna fill up. And it probably will become a one-lane road, and at which point in time, I could temporarily sign it, one side, both sides, whatever we see. If it doesn't pass,
Did we sign that already?
No,
No, not that far.
so you've done like right across or right next to Mant Park, just because we had the problem with kids running out in between parked cars.
Yeah.
And we could just extend
Go
it
farther
further
to the
down,
south.
because otherwise, all you need is one person to park 3 feet off the curb, and
Yeah.
it's a one-lane road.
Yeah.
So that would be another option if the committee doesn't want to pass this right now and just table it and kind of see how things go.
Yeah, I mean, or just, you know, like, because it's a brand new road, and it did present some challenges this winter. Are we hearing anything from John's at all about garbage issues or anything?
No. I think the main issues is if you get, you know, cars obviously parked across from each other, then you have two cars that happen to meet at that same space.
Yeah. I've
So,
had a few calls on
yeah.
when that happens.
And it, you know, admittedly, it is, you know, can be tight, especially if folks aren't parked close to the curb. If they, you know, take some liberties and are parked off the curb a foot or two, that can certainly create some issues, so.
And these,
I'll just say, putting out the fire and EMS hat and knowing that is a main thoroughfare for Stoughton Fire and EMS to get down to Dunkirk. Traveling and trying to weave between two parked cars on each side of the road is holding those crews up for incidents that are predictable and preventable. So if we don't go, I would be an advocate for not having parking on each side of the street, if nothing else, at a minimum, limit to one side.
do you see examples of this in Oregon as well?
Absolutely. And whenever we build roads, right, any new roads that go in, it's always a struggle between what's needed for emergency services and what looks nice in a neighborhood, or the plans and put medians in and restricting all this stuff. And our trucks are getting bigger and bigger, and I always think that if there is an event that we need to put a ladder truck up and we gotta put the outriggers out, we are very limited. We need to be precise when we put these apparatus for some of these incidents. And cars parked away makes a huge difference in successful mitigation or challenges.
I believe, if I recall correctly from our last public safety meeting, we did have a little bit of public feedback that was in the positive for parking on one side of the street.
There was one person who was for it, Marty Lamers, who lives at the corner of Isham and 4th there. Otherwise, if you remember, we mailed out, or hand-delivered actually, letters to all the residences within a block of that area and invited them to come to this meeting. Nobody actually showed up to speak either way with it. It was Marty in a conversation with former Chief Jenks, who was all for it.
And no one's received any other feedback since then?
Really not.
Okay.
The east side of the road, there's only 3 houses that'll be affected. One of them is a duplex, but three structures.
Yep.
City owns a big lot there, kind of goes into Dunkirk.
If you're down in the snow, right?
Yeah.
And that was the reason we picked that side for the no parking, is less impact to houses.
You know, the biggest thing is we have a pretty nice parking lot at Man Park now.
Yeah.
Do we need to do any more public notification on this issue? You guys are gonna get so sick of me beating this drum.
You guys have already done your due diligence and followed your policy, right? for
Yep.
Notice.
You just need to figure out what you want to do with it.
Okay. The proposal is no parking on the
East side, it's in the packet for the proposed amendment to the ordinance.
All right, well, does somebody want to take action on this?
This is it.
Yep.
Thinking about what you were saying there, Christina, about having like a trial period.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we could do here is just say, no parking from November to the end of February, end of March, something like that. And then, I mean, basically, that's kind of like what you would do with the snow emergency, and just say no parking for a particular period of time. You could do that here, but I don't know.
I don't know, I mean,
Sounds like this is more of a year-round than a seasonal issue.
I would recommend, you know, like Casey mentioned too, you know, their folks, you know, their apparatus, plus there's a lot more delivery trucks on the road these days than ever. You know, it does get tight all year, you know, so, you know, obviously you guys can do what you'd like, but I'd recommend if you're gonna do any restrictions.
I'll
to
make a motion to move it to council.
All right, any seconds?
Second.
All
So
those,
is, the motion's coming from the Public Safety Committee only, right?
That's fine.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure everybody knows what they're voting on and not voting on.
all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, we'll recommend that to council.
Who was the second? Was it Eric or Casey?
I think it was Casey.
What was it?
It sounded kind of like it.
Yeah. Who did the second?
Wasn't it you seconded, Jared?
Casey did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did. What me, is there?
All right, you want to go ahead with item number 7?
Yep. That's the,
Designated street stop signs at Greenbrier Drive.
Oh. This is the one there that you had spoke of last time, adding in the stop signs at Greenbrier Drive going into the new SDI.
Yeah, so we talked to Chris about it, and, you know, basically, it's pretty standard that when you have intersections that close together, you put up the stop signs, and it's consistent with what's already there on what Kingsland and Craven and some of the other roads. So that was kind of the rationale for putting them in, because the main loop is where we want to act basically as the, you know, as the main thoroughfare or whatever, the collector street, and then these little intersections there. And
starts for Creed, Kingsland.
This would be a Greenbrier by the new trailers building.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
Greenbrier and
Kingsland and Greenbrier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will all be stop signs anyway, because Greenbrier is will be a main road.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Chris said, and I said, what about yield signs? And she says, we shouldn't really even
We'll
have
have
any yield
stop
signs.
signs.
And I don't even know how many yield signs we have left anymore, seems like you
Not
guys have,
anyone, I don't think any.
Those into confusion.
yeah.
Stop signs.
Just so you guys know, there's certain main roads or collector roads, every road coming onto them will have stop signs. Greenbrier, we're gonna treat as a main road, so every road coming onto that will be stopped.
And to me, it's a lot like when you put stop signs up at Mingo Lake Springs, it's kind of the same thing. You got your main, I'll call it a collector, I don't know if it really is or not, but then you've got the smaller, shorter roads, and there's not as much traffic on them, so they might as well be the ones to stop.
Yeah, and by ordinance, I believe that, you know, the collector road, all the roads abutting that are coming into the collector get a stop sign.
So I think the conversation at the last meeting was really the rationale. You're saying it's kind of by ordinance, we're saying by practice, it makes most sense to do that on the collector roads. I don't know if there's really any objection to doing it. I think they were just looking for an explanation, and to me, I mean, these types of things, I feel can almost be approved administratively, or as part of the design.
Well, it's already ordinance from what I see,
The
so
only-
I'm not sure why it needs to go to see what committee and
The only
council.
difference is here is it's a brand new road. And it's just, I guess me and Brandon sit on and make it one of our main roads.
So it gets a functional classification from the DOT or the county and DOT. So once it gets that functional classification as a collector or
I wonder if
arterial,
it must just be a formality for Muni Code.
it could be, but
Planning is who brought it.
yeah, I'm just not sure it belongs at.
I think that's a conversation we can have with Chris and just say, because that might have been a practice where she came from, and it may or may not be necessary, because they're in a different county.
Sure, yeah, I think that's probably part of it, that, you know, if it's a collector level road, we sign it appropriately per the current ordinance.
Yeah.
So,
And we would just add it to that list of collector roads in the ordinance, we would
Right.
just amend that.
Right. So I don't, again, I don't think you need to take any action, because it's already in ordinance to put stop signs up. If that's what this number 7 is talking about, is Greenbrier at, well, anywhere in Greenbrier.
and I think that the other piece of this too, perhaps, maybe is the reason that we're meeting tonight, is that from the public safety and the public works standpoint, everyone's in agreement
Sure.
that this is the best course of action.
Yeah,
So
so here's
that's why
the
they
actual
kicked it to
map.
us.
Let me blow this up here.
Yep, and we would put stop signs to those, in those, like, trailers way, when that comes into play,
Even
create them in.
I don't know what the cul-de-sac's called, but that'll have a stop sign going on Kings Lane even, in the bottom corner there.
Yeah, it's a semicircle.
Semicircle, yeah.
You forget that.
That was really smart.
I can't keep track of any roads anymore.
And then eventually, you know, there'll be potentially that intersection at Country Club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that,
Anything that goes like onto a highway, the county will sign that with a stop sign.
okay. Yeah, we'll have to do another traffic impact analysis, I think is where we left it with,
Right, and then most likely that'll be around, you know.
that's what they were hinting at, we'll see. But yeah, you're right, it'll be a county decision, and, you know, they'll be working with stone trailers, and, but for now, yeah, where the red circles are, I mean, I think it makes sense, because if you don't, you're gonna have, you know, cars coming from each direction, plus where the stop sign is being proposed, and it'd be kind of a mess there, I would think.
I think one thing that we can do, though, is add Greenbrier to the list of collectors that is in the ordinance, and forgive me, I should have the ordinance.
Yeah, we just have to see if it meets the definition.
Yeah, I got it a couple of years ago from Dan, matter of fact, I just finished last year with all our, getting everything up to what the city wants
Yeah.
with the stop signs.
And that's one of them, or if you need help going forward, maybe the GIS person can help you guys with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all of our signs are on GIS,
Yeah.
and we have our Whistler and everything around there, so, yep.
All right, so we will let you take care of that one ordinance-wise and follow the Chris.
Yeah,
I think number 8 may sort of fall into that same realm as well, with it being a new street. Wouldn't this be stuff that you would naturally by ordinance?
So no, if there's no parking or parking restrictions, then yes, you guys need to vote on that and take a look at that, unless it already meets certain criteria, you know, near the traffic islands, the traffic calming islands, there is already ordinance that speaks to that. So I'm not sure where she's looking at, no
is
parking.
that this one? Am I-
Okay, yeah, so that's the throat going into County Road B. So that would be, you guys need to vote on.
Okay.
Is that gonna have turn lanes in it going out? I haven't seen
They
that.
painted on the road.
They're
Yeah,
working
so
with the
you're gonna have a
county
right
on
and
that.
left.
So SCI is doing land acquisition, they have 2 properties they have to acquire land from in order to do those turn lanes to satisfy the county. And then we instructed them to put up a gate, so traffic won't go in and out of there unless they have a fob for like the fire.
Yeah, they really didn't do that.
No, they really haven't, but so far nobody's living in there, so.
It's been fine.
Yeah, but if they start getting some buildings up and some residents there, we might have to follow up on that, but maybe it'll time out or we won't need to.
Yeah.
I think that's what they're hoping for.
Right. So you're asking about turn lanes though on Greenbrier?
Greenbrier going on to B.
Just painted on the pavement, but like Mayor mentioned, there's turn lanes on B off the main
I'm
road.
talking about Greenbrier, should be turn lanes,
Just painted.
just painted turn lanes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, that's
So
why
your
they're-
lines will come back at least 40 feet. So if you wanted to make that no parking there, you just,
So sorry, no parking in the red, so
Alright.
then it
Alright.
crosses all that, then pass trailers way.
all right.
And I think our theory in the past, especially with Rodney, is we start out maybe strict, we can always loosen it up later on the parking. It's a lot easier to do it that way than to make it more strict later on.
Yeah, and, you know, considering, you know, the multi-unit complex that's gonna be there, it's probably appropriate to try to keep them away from the intersections and away from B.
It's gonna be traffic and vision there, there are gonna be issues, and there's
Yeah.
gonna be kids.
And with the park that's going in there, and there will be, you know, plenty of parking in the complex. There's a parking lot that'll be across the street in the park, but again, that's not made for, you know, multi-day parking, which is another unfortunate thing, obviously.
Yeah, and some of that stuff is gonna be phased, you know, for the park master plan as we get funding. So we're not really sure how that is gonna play out, but eventually we'll get there.
And we had this exact same problem last year at Lincoln, when the turn lanes got put in, it wasn't no parking, and then people were parking on Lincoln, blocking the turn lanes and causing a huge traffic mess.
So common sense doesn't always.
Yeah, and that's literally a block up, you'd have the exact same situation if you don't, or if you allow parking, they're gonna park right up to that turn lane, and then you can't get into it, and it becomes a mess.
So what do we have to do with this one?
You'd have to vote on this one to restrict parking in the areas that are identified.
All right,
Can I
anyone?
understand this correctly, that there may be some redundancy to this, to existing ordinances?
Not that
No,
this
so there's a setback from each intersection,
That's what I-
if you will, but,
Is this redundant to that?
no, because this would encapsulate a longer area.
Yeah,
So
I
this
see no
would be,
problem moving this forward.
yeah, this would be
So
appropriate.
I'll make that motion.
Anyone want a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, I have a quick question regarding that one. Is that something too that we should look at, giving the chief, sort of administrative approvals for in new developments?
What we typically do is, when we get the concept plans, the planning director, Chris, will call a technical advisory committee meeting, a TAC meeting is what she calls them. And usually the chief, both chiefs are there, Brett's there, utilities is usually there, and we talk through all these items. Seems to be working.
Yeah, it does, I mean, specifically talk about maybe these types of things. We talk about traffic flow and all that type of stuff.
Snow removal, pretty much everything.
Snow placement, yeah, so there's a myriad of things, but.
But I mean, if the chief had a concern, he could definitely bring it to the team and make sure that if there was a method to the madness, he'd at least understand what that would be, and if not, we could change it.
But I think what you're asking is, instead of everyone having to come to public safety and go through council,
Thank you.
could council give that administrative team rights to
Just
identify
make that
these
decision.
problems and enact an ordinance? And I have no idea if that's allowed or not.
Yeah, I don't know either. If it was on site, I would say we could, as far as the site plan and planning commission. Go ahead.
So the biggest thing is like when you restrict parking in the ordinance, it spells out exactly what it
Yeah.
is. So if you give, the chief broad, authority to do that type of stuff, where are you gonna spell that out? Would it go
Yeah.
back in ordinance or?
He does have some temporary authority, so if there was an event, he could put up some short-term signage. But we could talk to the city attorney about that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would just, help move things along a little smoother.
Yeah, we're all for that.
I think it's good to do it now, because I can bill Stoughton trailers for the signs instead of the taxpayers paying for the signs. It's their development, they have to pay for all signage in there to start with. If we let it wait, the taxpayers would be paying for the signs.
We try to do as much upfront that we know about, obviously over time, as people use the developments, we kind of say, well, geez, we need to restrict parking here or loosen it up there, whatever. But like John said, the more upfront we can do ahead of time, the more we can do during the development, those costs associated go to the developer.
Yeah.
I'm brand new to this, but this change ordinance that I'm recommending or asking about would have to go through committee and council, but could there be an ordinance that just says anytime a major city collector street intersects with a county highway, it will be no parking for 40 feet, from the highway too, and then it would encompass all of those situations currently and going forward?
You could, you just have to be careful not to handcuff yourself. If 40 feet is appropriate, then.
Yeah, and I'm throwing out completely hypothetical, but,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Something where every one of these says, hopefully we grow more, we don't have to.
Yeah.
We can maybe have GIS do an inventory of what we have and what those distances are right now and see if there's a pattern there.
If you think about it, these don't come up that often, it's just, but you can also, as it goes to council, you can, amend the rules to go to, one reading instead of two potentially, so it's not so
Okay.
drawn out.
Right.
But, again, I'm all for efficiency, like, as you guys talk and, look at where signs are appropriate and things like that. It'd be nice just to, all right, we talked about it, it makes sense, let's go slap it up, so to speak. But also you gotta make sure it gets into ordinance so it's enforceable.
Yeah, yeah.
You can put a sign up all you want, if it's not enforceable, it doesn't mean anything.
Correct.
All right, moving on then to number 9, discussion of possible action to amend ordinance for the parking during snow emergencies.
Yeah, so we'll tag team this one. This is obviously a big topic that seems to come up every time I get the snow. Yeah, right. So like most of us in this room are all for making some sort of a change. Our current snow emergency parking ordinance is convoluted and clunky and leads to confusion from the general public. We get calls, PD gets calls, I'm sure that the mayor gets calls when folks get parking tickets. So essentially, we do have the ability to call a snow emergency when there is snow that's 3 inches or greater, or an ice event that's in the forecast. We can call a snow emergency, and that means that from midnight to 8 a.m., you need to park on the even or odd side of the road at midnight, which leads to a lot of confusion from folks as we call a snow emergency, let's say on the 12th. And folks need to understand that parking goes into effect at midnight on the 13th, which is odd. So you get a lot of people that park, well, hey, it's the 12th, they call it a snow emergency. When I parked my car, it is the 12th, I'm on the even side of the road. But is the 13th is when the parking restrictions go into effect. So that's where we get a lot of confusion, and a lot of that is because we don't call snow emergencies that often, maybe 5-6 times, probably roughly six on average over the last couple of years. So that does lead to a lot of confusion where it's intermittent, and people get very frustrated with the snow emergency. Our snow emergency is very convoluted compared to other municipalities. On the chart here, on the far right-hand side, I listed all the different municipalities and their snow emergencies. McFarland actually goes into the blue, just for your notes. But so our current snow emergency is to go through this chart. We have to declare the snow emergency, and if there's 3 inches or more in the forecast, or an ice event. And then it goes, like I talked about, it's even on parking at midnight to 8 a.m. For 3 consecutive days, unless it's canceled. I will tell you, for the most part, we do not go out that 3rd night because the staff needs rest. It's been 2 nights. On a significant storm, it's 2 overnight periods typically for a snow event. So we do the main plow, then that next night we come back and do the downtown. Then we do the even or odd side, the other side of the road, for those parking stalls. So it is basically a 2-night event, or 2-night plow for each event. That 3rd night is very rarely ever used. We usually cancel it prematurely. Again, it leads to lots of confusion. Usually the first few events, PD's issuing roughly 150, 200 tickets, somewhere in there.
150 to 300.
Sure.
The first one of the year is 200 to 300 tickets per night.
Yeah. So it is a problem that leads to confusion for folks. The biggest thing for us, in a perfect world, we would want all cars off the road. I'm not sure that's the will of the committee or council.
Doesn't seem realistic.
Yeah, so that also, we talked to the PD leading up to these meetings, that also leads to some enforcement issues. So the biggest thing as we kind of step through this is to create an ordinance or regulation that is consistent. Without that, it's going to create confusion. If we have intermittent type regulations, it leads to confusion and frustration. So the other option in yellow is seasonal, even on parking from, say, November 1st to April 1st-ish. In our proposal, we're talking about November 1st till March 31st, from we'll call it midnight to 7 a.m. This seems to be pretty prevalent amongst other cities kind of our size. So again, this creates that consistency, the rules that people know that, hey, when it hits November 1st, then I need to start doing even up parking. We would do a marketing blitz where we'd put stuff on Facebook, our website, of course, in the PowerPoint, we'll talk about different areas that we'll put signage up to let people know that we have parking restrictions for our residents plus visitors that come to town. So some of the cons with doing this type of thing, obviously you're creating a parking restriction. People gotta move their cars, which is also a pro. We wanna get people to move their cars. We have quite a few cars that are stagnant for days, weeks on end, and the PD and John work together to try to get these cars off the roadway. The biggest thing is we're trying to maintain a safe roadway for all residents. You have some that just don't move. They just sit there for weeks on end until we cause the car to move. You guys towed a bunch of cars a couple weeks ago.
16.
So.
And where there's one right now.
Yeah, right. They're dotted all over the
I was
place.
away from me in a car from, I think, Oklahoma, and I sitting there for about 4 months.
Sure. So that is an issue, and that would make it easier for the PD to enforce a ordinance that is consistent versus internet. The other option that we did consider, we talked about this at Public Works as well, just so you guys know, and the choice was to bring it to this committee so that this body can take a look at it. To do even on parking like we talked about in the yellow option, but also add a caveat in there where we can call a snow emergency, and basically it's all cars off the road. If there's a forecast for a certain amount of snow, I got 8 inches in there, that's probably a little much. We would probably call a snow emergency if it was 3 to 4 inch snowfall to get all cars off the road. But again, the con to that is enforcement.
Oh, where are you gonna put them?
Folks need to park off the roadway, they find a space in their current driveways or front yard or
I mean, I always think of Jackson Street because that's the extreme example of
Yes.
not enough parking.
So if we move to something like that, you could carve out certain areas that may be even odd for certain time periods, because there are certain areas in town where it's just not realistic to restrict all parking. That would have to be really thought about and thought through on how that would look, but that could be an option. But again, and selfishly, we would want all cars off the road, but talking to PD to enforce that is really the problem.
We would have the same problem in that model, I foresee, as we've got now with regular snow emergency, of people not understanding it, not knowing like, well, that block, they were parked there, so I thought on mine I could. We're like, well, that one was exempted, yours weren't. It's messy. Anytime it gets more gray, it gets messier for us.
Yeah. Like I said, selfishly, we were like, if we got this opportunity, let's try to get all cars off the road, but understanding that from an enforcement standpoint, that's just not realistic, and it could lead to more confusion, which we're trying to avoid.
And my preference is to have the same or less citations. I don't want to have more citations, and that's always been my argument is, today, for example, do you really want to go out and enforce that tonight? There's no snow on the ground, there's none in the forecast. Do you really want to be your officers handing out citations if there's 3 cars parked on the wrong side of the road after midnight tonight? And I mean, there's an argument to be made that we need to have the consistent enforcement, but my argument is no harm, no foul, so that's where I struggle with it.
I think once they get trained, it's gonna be automatic for them.
Yeah, I just don't know if some people are trainable, and maybe that's on them and not us, but.
The one ticket that, it'll be trainable.
Maybe it'd help to jump into the PowerPoint where we kind of go through how this, the yellow at Public Works was the one that was voted on to recommend to this committee, then eventually to approve tonight to go to council.
Is that they prefer the yellow?
Yes.
I lived in Oregon for 10 years, even out parking, and they didn't have to have a caveat for a number of inches of snow, but that first couple days after November 1st, it was
points on their car, saying, hey, by the way, you not started. And then after that, citations issued if people didn't follow it. But it seemed to be pretty good over there for those 10 years. I even lived in an apartment community where we had a lot of people that parked in front of our building because there's 2 apartment buildings across from each other. And it seemed to work just fine, having it even for a specific time period.
Yeah.
And that's from the PD side. We've talked to other departments. We've talked to Oregon. We have Chad O'Neill came here from Oregon and remembered enforcing it. And then some of our younger cops came from other departments. That it seems like everybody around us has alternate side from November till March, April. And they've all had the exact same sentiment that for the first week or 2, people screwed up, but then they learn, and then they just instinctively know what to do. And it's easy when they're doing it every day. Oh, I parked on that side yesterday, I parked on this side today, versus trying to figure out what day it is, what day is it gonna be after midnight, and then for 3 days I do this, and
I will admit, having a teenage driver that parks on the street, that there were nights that we were like, okay, today is at midnight, it's, and I mean, like, you have to, like, you really do. So I do think that there could be a lot of merit in it being just consistent. I parked here yesterday, I parked there tomorrow.
Yep. I mean, Prairie Street, there was in one block, 11 cars that all parked on the wrong side during one of our snow emergencies in the last month because the first person got it wrong. And then the second person, admittedly, when they talked to us, thought they should be parked on the other side, but then figured, well, person 1 must be smarter than me, and they just literally lined up down the whole block. And it's like, you know, we can, with some education, and we'll get to a slide on that, yeah. So, I mean, the PD is fully behind just alternate side parking where it's,
The problem with it is math.
yeah, yeah. And, you know, we give them
To me,
a couple
I
weeks to
think the
figure it out.
green option is the most, the one I prefer. That's me personally prefer. I don't know that anybody else would. The one thing that bothers me about it is that it's no parking on either side, and it would be an inconvenience for some people.
Yeah, the green option is that gives us the latitude to call snow emergency if there's 3 inches of snow in the forecast or an ice event.
Yeah, I know that, just history-wise, we did have the yellow option, that's where we were before we went to the current option we're in right now. And that happened, I think, one of your first years here.
No, this is the, white option has been here ever since I've been here, and we've tried to make some changes.
It was voted on yellow before.
In 2000,
I think you came with an option, with other options, where you wanted to change it shortly after you got here.
Yeah,
So-
there was not the will to make any changes.
So you want to go through the slides?
I think we should,
All right.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so, so here's our current ordinance, all of it. So, I can't see on the screen, but, it talks about basically that midnight to 8 AM, snow emergency, that there's even not parking, for 3 consecutive days. Like I said before, we typically would cancel that 3rd day because we're not out there, the staff is home resting for the next event. So, but it is very convoluted, and so the reasons why we're looking to make a change is kind of the same stuff we've talked about the last few minutes, is, you know, the current ordinance is convoluted and leads to confusion from the general public. There's no control over the snow emergency timeframe. Admittedly, if we were to go with the yellow option, which is just even not parking, we do lose that control, but it also creates that consistency.
That's why I like the green. It's very simple, straightforward.
Yeah.
So no emergency, you're not working.
Right.
Period.
Yep, and
There's no having to decide if, am I on the right side or not?
yeah, I like the way you think, but I'll let Chief maybe rebuttal that a little bit on the enforcement side.
I mean, part of, well, I mean, if we're gonna have no parking, we're gonna get complaints constantly.
Oh, yeah.
We deal with a ton of complaints right now when there's no parking on one side of the street, and that's the side they're supposed to be parked on under the current snow emergency. I mean, you're going to have a bunch of unhappy constituents if they're in areas, you know, where the apartment buildings are, where there's a lot of street parking. Of where am I supposed to put my car?
Yeah, I think,
What I would suggest is that we if the committees agree, if we go with the green, if we have a sunset clause in there after 2 years, maybe, to just do an evaluation, or maybe even after the first year, and do an evaluation at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna make a motion at some point, we can certainly go through the rest of the PowerPoint.
I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead,
And then, yeah, then you guys can do what you want, and we're happy to oblige. So, with our current ordinance, there's a heavy burden on enforcement. I mean, staff-wise, 3 people.
It's a full-time job for 3 cops. Sometimes we even had our CSO when we had one coming in, and I mean, that's all they're gonna do all night is deal with snow emergency parking. Again, the hope is, and our recommendation is the yellow option, that we can educate people early on, and instead of having to issue 200 tickets in one night, we issue a handful a night here and there. And it's not just a full-time job where they're trying to get it done.
We'll talk about kind of that enforcement that the chief staff, we're gonna do.
How long does it take for the actual write a citation?
It doesn't take long to write a citation. They've got to drive every single street during a snow emergency when the roads usually aren't the best. It's also a time where our staff is burdened with other things, because that's when we're gonna have crashes, we're gonna have slide-offs, we're gonna have all sorts of stuff. Other emergency services are running slower, so I can tell you during heavy snow events, we've got direction that our cops are going to EMS calls, because they're out and they're gonna get there quicker than the volunteers who have to get to the ambulance and then get the ambulance there.
You also have the getting out of the car and moving the
Yep,
snow
they
off the
gotta-
license plates
yep.
and finding VINs if there's not a plate on the vehicle.
And that's just the ticketing part of it. Our poor dispatchers who come in in the morning when all these people find the tickets and call to enter their not guilty pleas and to bitch and complain. The first couple of years, we actually had a voicemail box set up that if somebody called specifically about snow emergency, we sent them to the voicemail box, which had a whole message explaining the ordinance, because people do not get it, especially people who come here to visit, new residents. It's not a normal ordinance.
That's exactly what I like.
The dispatchers also manually enter every single parking ticket. We enter all of the vehicle information and the owner's information into our records management system. So each ticket also then gets scanned in, and it's very...
Yeah, it's certainly not a moneymaker.
No, not time. When you look at the time, I mean, in courts, it is by far the most not guilty pled
Right.
of anything. They get swamped all winter with people.
So that's why my goal would be is to write less tickets but yet have the roads clear. So however we can do that,
I think creating consistency will lead to less tickets over time.
But is there something to be said for consistency amongst communities, where
Yes.
it's,
Yes.
Well, and that's when somebody who lives somewhere else comes here to visit and they don't know about the snow emergency, they're not set up to get the email or get the text or other notification. That's a huge part of our complaint and then they're like, well, I've never even heard of a snow emergency. They're so rare.
I get periodically called some other directors, like, how do you guys run your snow emergency? Or you see it on the news, like, well, how does this work? And they explain to you, like, oh, that's interesting. We don't like it, I can tell you that.
For Greg with that green option, you could combine the yellow and green. And then if we were getting an inch of ice, we could call this real snow emergency, get everybody off the road so we could treat the roads without sliding into every car on the street.
So the green and yellow is actually the blue option on that chart. Which that combines both the even odd parking and then also gives us the latitude to call a true snow emergency that says all cars off the road. But then, again, you run into the enforcement issue. And again, I would love to see the green or the blue actually would be great. That's like, for us, from a maintenance standpoint, to a risk standpoint, liability issue standpoint, to get cars off the roadway is the goal.
I have a question. You said ice, which I'm going to throw a wild card out. do we have to potentially factor, because if we want to make this change, we want to make it long-term. We don't want to be changing this every 3 to 5 years, or even every 10 years. Should we consider climate change?
So, there could be potentially more events, different types of events. We're seeing a lot more potentially ice, because people think, it's a warm day. Well, it's 32 degrees, which means, we're at 33 degrees. That rain that we're gonna get is gonna turn to ice. Even, tomorrow night into Friday, we could have
Thinking
some
about
of that.
flash freeze day.
We had that 2 years ago, where we had basically a wet, heavy snow where it was in the upper 20s, and we had a significant snowfall. That next day, it dropped below 0 for about a week. And we had, it was a difficult storm to deal with, and that's where that, the temperature swings really created issues for us.
I mentioned ice for the snow emergency, but let's say we're gonna get 18 inches of snow. I've been here for that. It's hard to get around with
First,
our cars, you're pushing
first snowfall we had this year was 13.
14 feet of snow in front of your truck. It's a tough deal.
I learned how to drive in Duluth, Minnesota.
Any more of you?
We're gonna put her in a plow truck before it's all set.
I'm not scared.
Yeah.
We drive on snow all winter up there.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, in southern Wisconsin, it is somewhat sporadic. Admittedly, the last 2 years, we haven't had many major snow events. This year, we've had quite a few, now kind of a little bit of a lull period. So it's really tough to plan for. They are sporadic, which does lead to the need for a consistent type of ordinance, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing I got from the last meeting is with the technology, I think we can do a better job of communicating and educating from when we put this ordinance in, and that's really why I'm more open-minded than I would have been a couple of years ago.
Sure.
And I think that's the key is, we have people that can sign up. I think we really need to promote that better and figure out ways of doing that, and I think.
So, later on in the slides, we talk about how we would actually roll this out, which is option, the yellow option, which is even odd parking, which is PD's recommendation as well, just from an enforcement standpoint, how we would roll something like that out to the public. Any ordinance change, for that matter, this is how we would roll it out. As later on in the slides, we talk through that.
All right, are you done with this one?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
So here's the options that we did talk about. So option 1 is seasonal. This is yellow in your program. Seasonal even odd parking from November 1st to March 31st from midnight to 7 a.m. The pro is obviously allows for that consistency. The con is that cars are still allowed to park on the roadway, and we would need to plow around them, leaving a windrow, potentially a risk to our apparatus that are going down the street, or other motorists for that matter, because there is an obstacle. Obviously, when that car then leaves that space, there's still a windrow that remains there. One issue that we see is if we do get a flash freeze that next night, that those windrows become pretty hard. They can either damage cars that are going down the roadway that have to go across it, or potentially our equipment, our wings as well.
Well, another pro that I'm just thinking of as we see this is with the consistency of alternate side parking. You guys talked about you almost always cancel it before the third night because your drivers are so tired. You could give them the third night off, and then part of the crew could come back on the fourth night, the fifth night, whenever, to deal with them, and we're still in the alternate parking, because we run in a lot with Shimmy where we do the snow emergency, we do it for 2 days, then you wanna clean up the street when you got your crews back, and we're like, well, that car's there and it's legally parked now because we're on what would be day 5, the emergency's canceled, and we can't do anything about it. You can't get your plow trucks in, and we're knocking on doors begging people to move their cars just so we can plow a windrow.
The biggest thing is creating that consistency, because if they goof up the first night, it throws it all off.
Yeah.
Because now, okay, they goofed up, we had to plow around them on the wrong side, and now they have to move to the side that we already cleaned up.
Yep.
Or they have to stay there. No, I'm sorry, they have to stay in the same side.
Stay parked,
And so they're not moving, because if they move to the other clean side, they'd be in violation.
And we run into that with the current snow emergency, and we would run into that in this model too, where we ticket people 2 nights in a row because they're like, oh, I was on the wrong side, I move it, and you're like,
Right.
well, idiot, you should have
Yeah.
left it there
Yeah.
because now you're on the right
And
side.
that's where that consistency though would come into play, because
Yeah.
chances are the majority of people are going to know the program. And again, I keep saying later on the slides, we do have, kind of a marketing blitz that we would roll out along with PD and using our various, Facebook options, the website. We have signs that we would place out in strategic areas of the city, the gateways to the city, if you will. So we do have a marketing plan that we would put out, any change to our
The thing is with it, whenever you have it where it is open to interpretation, which it is, both of those plans, right, the yellow, the blue, even the white, there's interpretation there. And there is no consistency when you have interpretation.
Well, the consistency would be even on parking.
Every night.
I mean, but even that, I'm saying, there's interpretation.
Any ordinance or law, people will, interpret it how they want. Stop signs.
That's my point.
There's no interpretation. It is what it is, very black and white.
I like that option.
Yeah, because more technology you throw into it, technology is helpful in a lot of ways, but it can also make things really tough. Because, if it fails, it fails.
Yeah. And that's where over time, that consistency, people just know that that's what to expect.
Do we have any statistics on how many tickets, like, the cities in the yellow are writing in a snow emergency, do you know?
Well, they wouldn't have snow emergencies, they just, if you
Or
could do like,
even not,
in
do
a
they-
season or something
yeah.
like that, I can look into that, I don't know what off the top of my head.
I mean, that would be the proof that it works.
Yeah, and you'd want that data, early on in the season, so if they have that seasonal even on parking, how many tickets you write in November versus December, January, February. Option 2 would be a snow emergency that all vehicles are off the road during a time frame dictated by myself. So again, that would be your green option, or kind of reverse a little bit here. So the pro is obviously, Alder Gents, like you were talking about, it provides a precise time frame that is dictated by us to get all cars off the road. Just off the road, that's it. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. The problem with that is it does create that inconsistency that we currently have. Then also the enforcement is still an issue when it's sporadic like that. That's what PD and Kitty kind of talked to us about, is that that's great. I'm sure they would love all cars off the road too. It's less opportunity for accidents, for our apparatus, for the general public. But the biggest thing is that you can create any ordinance that you want. Can you enforce it?
Yeah, that's,
And how happy are your constituents with the enforcement of it?
Sure. I will tell you, I get a lot of calls from folks when you do issue a snow emergency and they got a ticket, and they're like, boy, that's a stupid ordinance. And I always have to agree with them. And I always tell them to call your alder, honest to God, and let them know what your feelings are on our current snow ordinance. And the biggest thing that they tell me is that, boy, when I came from another community, it was, they had even on parking, it was easy. I get that sentiment often. Like if your ordinance was easier to understand and more consistent, it'd be better.
and I remember us, when we did have that, even on, people were complaining about it, that's why it got changed.
Anytime you regulate anything,
Yeah.
it's.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah,
That was before I started.
no, it wasn't that far along.
I started in
About 10
'90
years
and
ago
it's
that
no-
we changed it.
Because I was working here for the first ever snow emergency tickets, and because we did the very first one ever, we did warnings, and that would have been, it was either 2000 or 2001 when it switched.
Okay.
I guess about 20 years ago, 25 years
Not
ago.
even parking, I don't remember that.
Sure.
It was a long time ago.
So option 3 combines option 1 and 2 into even odd parking from basically November 1st until March 31st, and then also gives us the option to call a snow emergency where it's all cars off the road for a dictated amount of time. So we can say you cannot park on the roadway from 3 p.m. until 3 p.m. the next day. One of the things that we run into is that sometimes the cessation of the snowfall event is at 9 AM. Well, that's after our snow emergency that we could call, and sometimes we have to call because it would do us no good. Our staff comes in at, let's say, 9 AM at the end of the snowfall. They plow for their 8-10 hours, and then they're on their way before the ordinance would even take effect at midnight. So that would give us latitude to say, okay, we know the snow is gonna be done around 9 o'clock. We can call a snow emergency from, let's say, 8 o'clock until midnight or 8 o'clock the next morning. And that would give us the opportunity to clean the roadway within the time frame that the snowstorm dictates. Now, again, I go back to chief, if that's enforceable or not. You know, for us selfishly, that's what we would want, is to dictate the time frame. But again, that can lead to confusion too, because if they don't get the message that from 8 to 8 or whatever time that we dictate, I've seen that in the community that I worked for before, was that if they don't get the message, I mean, it's blasted all over the place, but, you know, if you guys
They could be at work or out of town.
Sure, things happen, you know, and you'll have the same issues when you do that type of thing, because it's not a consistent ordinance or regulation. So that's the kind of the three options that we've been talking about for the last half hour. The preferred ordinance, you know, talking with PD and also at Public Works, was the seasonal even odd parking from November 1st to March 31st. From midnight to 7 AM. So that's the yellow option in the first graphic.
Yellow option.
Yeah. PD, and then, you know, we talked with them, after the Public Works meeting, before this meeting, and in preparation for this, and putting this package together. You know, selfishly, we want all cars off the road. However, if it's not enforceable, and, you know, if towing is not really an option, why have that? We would rather have something that is consistent, that we can count on, that people understand, versus calling a snow emergency that doesn't really work anyways. And we're back in the same position.
There's one other thing, that November 1st would help me with that last round of leaf pickup and my last round of sweeping.
Get those cars to move.
Get the cars to move so we get all the leaves instead of, we gotta go around the cars.
Yeah, it is a problem. So that's a good point. So the proposed ordinance change, as written here, I don't have to read through the whole thing, but basically it would talk about that between November 1st and March 31st of each year, parking shall be permitted only on designated sides of public street within the city as follows. So we talked about the odd and even parking restrictions, then the time of day, which would be midnight to 7 AM, and so on. So again, simple, very simple, and consistent with a lot of other communities around us. And that's the biggest thing that we talked about, is creating something that's consistent. Well, if there is already no parking on the odd or even side of the road or in a cul-de-sac, so unfortunately they can't park on that side of the road, the existing parking restriction would prevail, meaning that they also couldn't park on the, let's say the parking restrictions on the odd side of the road, and the even side is at midnight, they can't park on the roadway. So, John Jackson Street, that could create some issues, and maybe that's something that we need to
Yeah, I think
talk about.
the issue there is talking to the landlord. I mean, I don't know about that particular units, but I know on some of the condo units, they have things right into the rules that you can only have 1 or 2 vehicles per unit, and I think what we're seeing out there is people are exceeding whatever standard was in place when they were built, you know, many years ago. You know, maybe they were a 1-bedroom, now you have 2 people living there and they each have a car, and maybe one of them has a kid, so now they have a 3rd car.
Yeah, you know, I get it, but, you know.
Well, the landlord should be working with us to help enforce that.
Correct, yeah.
So because my feeling is, especially on Jackson, some of the folks there are the ones that can at least afford to get a parking citation.
Jackson, the parking is not restricted on,
No.
it's only in certain areas around the daycare, I believe. So there is an opportunity for both sides of the
Round
roadway.
curve.
So that was a bad example.
South Page Street is where we get the most complaints, because from Main Street, quite a ways south, the lane of travel, the southbound lane is right up to the curb, so there's no parking on that side, they can only park on the one side. Then we do have an apartment building, a couple duplexes, things like
Yeah.
that, and they're all used to parking on that east side, and then
Yeah.
during snow emergencies, they can't park on the other, and they
Yep.
all get piles of tickets
And-
and complain.
And so my rebuttal to that is that each one of those houses has a driveway. And most of those are very long driveways where there's ample opportunity for parking.
They just don't wanna switch the cars
And I
around.
understand that, you know, we all do our own thing at home to jockey things around for, you know, 1 or 2 nights.
Right.
You know, is really not too much to.
But again, the consistency of it, if they know they're going to get a ticket every other night, they're gonna start doing a better job of planning on how to deal with this versus, oh, it's only gonna come up, well, maybe this year we'll have no snow, so we don't even have to think about it. And then, oh my God, we're getting 6 inches of snow and they haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
So again, consistency, I think, in those troublesome areas will be helpful because it forces them to think about it.
Yeah, many of those are also short blocks where they can park around the block, and there's opportunity for that,
Yeah.
so. Public service announcement, so this is, any change that we do make, this is the biggest thing that we need to get right, and obviously collaborate with the PD on. So, you know, Facebook obviously is a tool that we use to put out, you know, in, you know, 2 weeks leading up to that November 1st date or something like that, and keep blasting it leading up to that November 1st date. The utility bill stuffer, anytime we do a major change like this, we can add that into the utility bill stuffer as a leaflet. City website, of course. We do have 2 message boards that we can deploy in strategic areas to let people know that parking restrictions are now in effect. We do that every year, not just this first year, but every year. That keep in mind, parking restrictions are in effect from November 1st to March 31st. We have parking or some sort of a message like that. Magnets we send out each year in your tax bill for our curbside collection. We could add something on there where it talks about the even odd side parking or whatever restrictions you guys, you know, vote on. We can send those out, so each resident does have a magnet that if they choose to put on the fridge or any other metallic surface, they can utilize that. The town planner, the calendar, that's, you know, distributed widely throughout the community. We could have that in the calendar where that November 1st could have a significant, or some writing on there that talks about even on parking starts this day. City calendar, we can also label it on there. Email notification, working with IT, we can blast that for those that sign up for it.
You could bring a bright, shiny, pretty snowplow to Mant Park for Taste of Stoughton with some signage on it.
Sure, yeah, John will
Do
stand
some
there and talk
community
about it.
events this summer.
Yeah, no, all
I'm
that type of
serious,
stuff, all joking or kidding aside, I think that
The
those are
kids
great
would
ideas.
love to get that close to a
If it
snowplow.
passes and my boards are available, I could put a board down at Man Park during an event, or out to, Full Avenue.
The kids would love to get that close to a snowplow
They do,
Yeah,
in the
Yep.
summer.
yeah.
I think that'd be super
Yeah,
cool.
there's lots of different opportunities that we can take advantage of and get the word out. You know, I think that's what we heard loud and clear too, is if there is a change, how are we gonna message that to the general public? To make sure that it is a known thing, and also, we want compliance, obviously, to reduce that confusion. We don't wanna see people getting tickets, but we do need cars to move for us, for various reasons, not just snowfall. So this is what we talked about for signage. We would deploy signs out at these key locations that are basically gateways to the city. It would be a sign something like this that you see on the left-hand side, and we would put those out probably a couple weeks before that. It says December 1st, but it would be November 1st. We'd have to create the sign. But it would be something like this that is prevalent, sized appropriately for the mile per hour that folks are traveling. or 40 miles an hour, or 41, whatever it is.
What they're supposed to be
Yeah,
traveling or what they are
We'll
traveling?
plan for a little bit more, but, again, we'll deploy signs out in strategic areas seasonally, and then take them down, basically the spring. So go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the big questions that came up as we talked through this is like, okay, so now November 1st, you're just gonna start writing people tickets. And obviously, we don't wanna do that too. We want there to be an educational period. I anticipate that this wouldn't just be the first year, it'd be every year. We're prohibited from putting any just informational stuff on people's vehicles, but we can put enforcement actions on their vehicles, much like a parking ticket or a warning. So we would have warnings printed up, and for the first couple weeks, short of it, November 1st being some 18-inch snowfall, instead of them getting a ticket, they're just gonna get a warning put on their car if they're on the wrong side, to hopefully educate the people that didn't know about the ordinance, were visiting, things like that. And then we have discretion. So, the mayor, you talked about, well, we wouldn't enforce this if there's no snow at all. The flip side to that is we'd have to enforce it some when there's no snow, because again, what we're looking for is consistency. Otherwise, we're right back to just a snow emergency where we're only issuing tickets when there's snow, and people don't follow it. But at least the cops wouldn't feel that like, it's a snow emergency, this has gotta be priority number one, this is all I'm gonna do all night. They can drive around, if they see a car, issue a ticket or a warning, and kind of have more of a relaxed enforcement, I guess is what I would call it. And then obviously during large snow events, that's where, again, we would kind of go back to the old model of we are gonna issue everybody a ticket, because that's the purpose of it. They're impeding the plows, they're impeding us getting around. But hopefully it wouldn't be the 100 tickets on that night, because people have gotten tickets here and there, there'll be more talk within the community, they'll have gotten warnings, and hopefully learned long before the large snow event of how to park, and are already doing it, and thus making our job a lot easier. So, it's a goal. Again, talking to the cops that have come from other places, they said, it's so much easier just, they're out driving around all night anyways, instead of like, I have to touch every single street, they just look down the street and like, oh, there's one on the wrong side. Oh, it's that same car that's always on the wrong side, they're gonna get a ticket. Oh, I've never seen this car on this block before, let's give them a warning and then see, in a couple nights, is it still a problem?
So parking ticket costs, I think right now it's 25.
25 for everything other than snow emergency, which is
It's $20 for everything except snow emergencies
20.
is 30 and handicap is 50.
What's 50?
Handicap.
handicap. So again, I would recommend that this be that lower $20 versus the special snow emergency one. Again, not as painful to people that do end up getting those tickets.
So with the current ordinance, it's all of the current regular parking violations can be doubled twice before they're suspended. So it goes from 20 to 40, 40 to 80, suspended goes to 95. Snow emergencies can only double once and then get suspended. So it goes from 30 to 60, suspended goes to 75.
So
You'd be eliminating one of those, right? This snow emergency one.
Yeah, there'd be no more snow emergency.
Correct.
If this were to prevail.
So you'd have to figure out where you want to set that, and if it would still double and all that. And that's part of the ordinance.
I would recommend that it matches the other parking violations.
Okay, you guys can bring that back.
And I added this on the bottom, and I'm not speaking for the PD, but
I love
there's other options you can consider, and again, that's probably up to the PD and the judge too, but there's other things you can do to gain compliance with monetary, maybe it's, okay, I don't wanna speak for you guys.
And that'd be more of the judge really deciding, is he
Sure.
willing to accept some other sort of
If
penalty?
it's not a moving violation, does it go on the record?
No parking tickets.
Yeah, so I figured.
If they're suspended, if they don't pay their ticket, their registration on their vehicle gets suspended. So you can't register a new vehicle or renew your current vehicle, whoever is on that vehicle.
But it doesn't show on their driving record.
Not on their driving record, but on the,
Vehicle record.
yes.
They would have to clear that up then, and then they could register.
I And that reports to your insurance, correct?
Nope, I don't think these ones do.
No, because that's just tied to the vehicle, not to a
Yeah.
person, so it's not a moving violation. Moving
Okay.
violation is what affects
The
your insurance.
registration suspension doesn't get reported?
I don't believe so.
Because we actually satisfy that through the DMV.
Okay.
Okay. That was it?
All right, moving on, we have a couple future, agenda items listed,
Did you guys want to take any action on any of that, or?
I'm
Well, I
feeling
think
like
it's-
you're gonna have to bring some stuff back. I mean, we don't have to, we're not gonna implement it until next
Right, right.
fall anyway.
What do you guys want to know, I guess?
Oh, we wanna know the ticket amount, and then we talked about, the signage, the warnings and all that. What else, what option, you know, that's really what needs to be the action.
For signage, you want to know what the sign would say, or?
Yeah, I'd like to know how that food donation option would work.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
I can ask.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I think that would be very well received and a great PR move.
The only downside I would see to it, depending, I mean, this could really go off the rails, because if it's bringing in a canned good, and somebody's like, well, I don't have to move my car, it's gonna cost me a 40-cent can of beans.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the point in having the ordinance at that point in time if they can just, well, give me the ticket, here's your can of corn, give me the ticket, here's your can of corn. You know, we,
It would have to equal like a $20 bag of groceries, you said.
yeah, and then it's, they have to bring in a receipt, like I said, this could go off the rails of like, well, you bought that on sale, it's only a $15 bag of groceries, or,
It's a good price, but probably not practical.
Yeah, or maybe they pay half the ticket and that,
yeah, and again, we issue the tickets, the judge, you know, if somebody pleads not guilty, now we've got a judge trying to decide, I'm gonna sentence you to how much groceries.
Cans of cream corn.
Yeah, so,
Your enforcement, you'd have to, yeah.
I still think just a monetary fine, and again, with consistency, is the way to go. That seems to, I think, motivate people a little better.
We can go out and help you shovel.
Yeah.
and Brett, I think that would it be Public Works that would take action to take this to council? I don't know that I could.
We could, I mean, there's a lot of overlap with the committee members.
Yeah.
We could certainly do that at the Public Works Committee level. You know, we really don't want to bring this to council until after March 31st. We don't want anything to be enacted early.
Yeah.
So we have time, obviously, to do it, but we want to.
You were gonna talk to some of the neighboring communities and see how many citations there. So I think there's some things to bring back. The question is, do you bring them back to public safety, or do you bring them back to public works, or both?
I can go to the Public Works if you want.
Doesn't matter to me either way.
You guys are all gonna see it anyways at council.
Yeah, I'm fine if it goes back through Public Works.
3 to 4 alders are on Public Works too, so.
Are you fine with that?
I'm fine with it, whatever you wanna do.
Unless
Yeah.
Eric or Casey wanna see it again.
All right,
My only recommendation would be to do the yellow option. I think that's the most simplistic one. Like I said, I looked in Oregon where they have that, and it seems to work really well. Not a lot of people pitch fits about it, so.
I'm willing to go with that. I mean, it's not my preference, but it, you know, the one that you guys seem to feel is the best.
Yeah.
I'd rather.
Publicity wise.
do you want to sort of take a vote by option 1 through 4 quick?
I mean, if you guys, you have to make a motion, but if we're not ready for prime time, you wanna bring it back to Public Works in March, just to do our homework and shore it up.
When we present this at, however it goes here, when you present this at council, you would be going through this whole.
I would present the one option. So the work would be done at the committee level to decide
Yeah.
if you wanted to offer amendments to the, proposed,
No, I don't want to confuse it anymore.
right, and so this is where we kind of get into the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of different types of options that we have, but going to council, whatever your recommendation is what we would take there and present only that.
Just so you guys know, Brandon, Brett, and myself are all fine with the yellow option. There's no one way or another for us. We agreed to the yellow when we sat on and talked a couple weeks ago.
So, like I said, selfishly, all our gents, we'd love to do all carts off the road, believe me.
And like I said, I've got I can park off the street.
I appreciate your,
Doesn't bother me.
definitely appreciate your
But I have to
support.
be considering, I will do everything, so
Yeah.
that's why, yellow would be fine.
Yeah, and really just hearing from the PD about, well, that's great, because they want to see that too, but it's really the enforcement is the issue, and we appreciate that.
I mean, part of the issue, if the goal is get all the cars off the street, my next question then would be, what kind of enforcement do you want? Because you can pass an ordinance where the penalty, if you're on the street during a snow emergency, is your car gets towed, then we can get all the cars off the street. Otherwise, issuing a ticket to a car doesn't help them get a plow truck through. So, you know, we can shoot for perfect, but people are not gonna be happy with perfect when they wake up and their car isn't there anymore. So then it's like, what's the best option, taking the citizens into mind that, you know, sometimes have parking issues or have no driveway.
That's where our job comes in.
All right, so you have everything that you need to move forward with this with Public Works for now?
Yeah, we'll bring it back, maybe even next month is just, keep it on the agenda.
Let's see, do you meet before we do?
Next month it's the third Thursday, I'm not sure which.
The fourth, right?
Yeah.
Well, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
You could vote on it and send it to us.
Yeah,
You vote on
and then by the
it. How do
time,
you know they're even meeting on us?
right, it just go to council. And by the time it went to the council, it would be April, so it'd be after the March 31st date, even, or it could be, May or whatever.
And
but
plenty of time for you to implement it over the
We
summer.
got time, so we're not gonna do anything early on, because we don't want people to forget about it.
Well, that third Saturday in June, you gotta have that plow truck down, man.
We got you.
All right. Counting on it. All right, so just quick review of our future agenda items, and then we'll be looking for a motion to adjourn. So, quick update to the e-bike electric scooter on roadway. Greg and I have been doing, some research and some reading outside of here. I heard from, Adrian Nenow, who also sits on the MPO, that MPO is doing some work to come up with some sort of general guidelines for all municipalities to sort of, tag team and use together. So, I think that they're doing that in, March. So maybe ask her to come to our April meeting and update us on what's going on at the county level with that, if that works for everybody. And then the building study presentation, and then the public safety request form, we're gonna bring back in March. Does anybody else have any other future agenda items they'd like to add? Acting Chief, I'm sure you'll come up with some between now and then.
We probably have a Jackson Street changing from no parking to parking, but we're in the infancy of that right now.
Okay. All right. So I guess if nobody else has anything else, then we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
But just your vote.
Oh,
Well, then,
all in favor, sorry.
Aye.
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 I think my brain automatically just went boom.
And nobody's opposed.
No one's opposed to adjourning.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Thank you.